this video, we will continue looking at the cultures of early American Indians and the ways in which they used their environment to obtain food, clothing, and shelter. In the previous video, we examined the peoples living in the Southeast and Northeast. In this video, we will focus on the Arctic, Plains, Southwest, and Northwest regions. Additionally, we will look at Element C of this standard, which requires students to discuss how American Indians continue to contribute to American life, including but not limited to their contributions to visual and performing arts and literature. This video will also address Element A of Geography Standard 3, which considers why groups occupied certain areas and the impact that had on their villages. Please note that no specific tribes are mentioned in these standards. For the purposes of your further study, some of the better-known tribes from each region will be pointed out in this video, but students are not expected to learn the names of individual tribes within a region or know details of specific cultures. Remember that the focus of Standard SS3H1B is on how American Indians used their environment to meet their needs. Let's begin with a look at the American Indians who lived in the Arctic. You may also consider expanding your study of this region to include parts of the subarctic, which is typically shown on maps as a separate region. Among the best-known groups from this region are the Aleut and the Eskimo, including the Inuit. Remember that the standard does not refer to specific groups within the region. Studies should focus on the impact of the environment of the Arctic on the ways American Indians in the area lived. In the previous video, we talked about cultures that lived in permanent or semi-permanent villages, thanks in large part to easy access to rich soil and abundant fish or game. Unlike the southeastern and northeastern Indians, most Arctic American Indians moved with the seasons in search of food. Due to the extreme temperatures and extraordinarily short growing seasons, most tribes in this area relied on hunting and gathering. Depending on the season, people would follow the migrations of caribou, seals, otters, walruses, and whales. People hunting these animals would live in temporary shelters, including igloos made from blocks of snow or dome-shaped tents made from caribou hide. It is worth noting that not all people in this region lived in temporary housing. Some people lived in more permanent settlements near the coast where they could rely on fishing and hunting ocean animals. Access to food, as always, played the most important role in determining settlement patterns. Clearly, the clothing of the Arctic people was impacted by the cold winters. Clothing was made from animal skins and furs and included pants, coats, gloves, and boots. Now we will explore the Plains region and the American Indian groups that lived there. The Plains region stretches all the way from present-day Canada to present-day Texas. Among the best known of the tribes found in this region were the Pawnee, the Sioux, the Crow, and the Cheyenne. Similar to the Southeast and Northeast Indians, the Plains Indians primarily grew corn, beans, and squash, and hunted and fished. When horses were introduced in the area by Spanish settlers, following the movements of buffalo became easier, making buffalo a more reliable food source. This led many Plains tribes to give up the dome-shaped earth lodges that had once made up their permanent villages in favor of portable teepees that could be moved with the hunt. While bison provided an important food source, they were also useful in making clothing along with deer and antelope skins. Because the Plains region stretches so far, clothing varied by the climate. Farther north, men wore shirts, leggings, moccasins, and robes. Farther south, men would often leave the upper part of their bodies bare. Women typically wore long dresses, moccasins, and leggings. Clothes were often decorated with paintings, embroidery, and fringe, and battle regalia, including feathered headdresses, was important to the Plains peoples. Next, we will look at American Indians of the Southwest. Among the best-known tribes in this region were the Pueblo, Navajo, and Apache. Southwestern American Indians were impacted by the climate and geography of the region. The large plateau, now known as the Colorado Plateau, along with canyons, mesas, and river valleys, make up this area. Some southwestern Indians settled along waterways, which allowed them to successfully farm the fertile land. These groups developed irrigation systems to water their fields. Farming tribes in the Southwest grew corn, beans, and squash like American Indians in other regions and expanded their farming to include additional crops that were introduced by Spanish settlers. Farming allowed for permanent villages to be built because people could obtain what they needed to survive while staying in one place. Pueblo homes are probably the best known of the permanent settlements in this area. These stone and adobe homes include different rooms dedicated to sleeping, food preparation, and storage. Tribes who did not live in close proximity to water relied more heavily on hunting deer, rabbits, and antelope, and gathering wild plant foods. Some tribes moved between summer villages near their crops and dry season camps that provided access to game. Other tribes in this region were nomadic and lived in teepees that could easily be transported. Most American Indian tribes in the Southwest region wore clothing made of animal skins, but the Pueblo tribe grew cotton and wove most of their clothing. The final region we will explore was home to the Northwest coastal American Indians. The better-known tribes in this region included the Tlingit, Chinook, and Kwakiutl tribes. You may also consider looking into the Plateau region, which lies to the east of the Northwest coastal region. As you would expect, the peoples of the Northwest coast took advantage of the resources provided by the nearby ocean and many rivers. Much of the diet eaten by the tribes in this region was made up of fish, including herring and salmon, and marine mammals, including whales. In addition, people ate wild plants and hunted for game in the mountains that made up the eastern boundary of this region. Because people had access to abundant food sources, villages were permanent, though some groups moved to different areas depending on the season. The homes in these villages were large and made of wood, which could be easily accessed in this heavily wooded region. American Indians of the Northwest coast wore fairly simple clothing made of animal skins or wool. Women typically wore skirts or gowns, and men wore breechcloths, leggings, and shirts, though on warm days they wore very little. In addition to animal skins, cedar bark fiber was used to make clothing in this region. While most of the information we study with third graders about American Indian cultures throughout North America is rooted in the past, it is important that students realize American Indians still exist all over our continent and continue to make important contributions to American life, including in the visual and performing arts and literature. For thousands of years, American Indians have created a variety of art forms, many of which were designed for a specific purpose, such as storage containers, weapons, or religious objects. Designs added to these objects were rarely focused on realism. Instead, the creators aimed to capture the spirit or essence of the subject. Art was also a reflection of the natural environment of the people. Indians living on the plains used the available materials to weave beautiful baskets. Indians in forested areas created impressive wood carvings, and Indians in clay-rich areas sculpted incredible pottery. In addition to the visual arts, American Indians are known for the performing arts, particularly music and dance. American Indian music reflects important aspects of each culture, including spirituality and religion, but also daily life, including lullabies and songs for personal enjoyment. As with the visual arts, music and dance differ by region and culture. Storytelling and mythology are important aspects of American Indians' literary history. Many Indian cultures separate their myths or folk tales into two types: those that happened long, long ago when the world was very different, and those that happened in more modern times. North American Indian myths are typically focused on animals with supernatural powers, And though most myths stand alone without a need to understand the background of the characters as you would in, say, a Greek myth, there are some animals, such as the raven and the coyote, who appear more frequently. As we have said again and again, it is important to realize that the literary traditions of American Indian groups were specific to their cultures and heavily influenced by their environment. American Indian writers continue to contribute to American culture, and examples of child-friendly American Indian myths and folktales can easily be found on the internet as well as in print in school and public libraries. At the end of their study of early American Indian cultures, students should understand that American Indians across the continent lived diverse lives that were heavily influenced by the environments in which they lived. Students should also recognize that American Indians continue to play an important role in modern American life in many ways, including the influence of the visual and performing arts and their literature. If you would like to learn more about the groups living in the regions discussed in the video you just watched, consider visiting these websites. The History Channel offers an overview of the American Indian tribes of each region, along with brief videos and a collection of images. The Native American Heritage Month website hosts a large collection of resources from the Library of Congress, the Smithsonian, the National Park Service, and others. The National Museum of the American Indian is a part of the Smithsonian Institution and focuses on sharing the richness and diversity of Native cultures with the public. The museum's website includes access to its impressive collections and a variety of resources for educators.